Well, for now, peace is prevailing in the Middle East. But the biggest question is, for how long? The guns between Washington and Tehran have fallen largely silent. Yet the ceasefire now in place is explicitly short, conditional, and reversible, leaving the region balanced between a breather and a renewed spiral of war. US President Donald Trump has announced a 2-week suspension of planned military strikes on Iran, casting it as a double-sided ceasefire tied directly to Iran's behavior in the coming days. In fact, this move followed hours of provocative rhetoric, including Trump's threat to destroy Iranian civilization. But now it seems like last-minute diplomatic interventions by the mediators help pull both sides back. For now, the announcement has opened a narrow diplomatic window. But even Iran's own leadership stresses that this does not signify the termination of the war, warning its forces remain ready to respond to any perceived violation. Well, the ceasefire is explicitly defined as a 2-week pause rather than a formal end to hostilities, and both Washington and Tehran have underlined that it can be revoked quickly. In fact, Iran's Supreme National Security Council has framed the step as a tactical move to enable negotiations, not a political concession, declaring that its hands remains upon the trigger should the enemy commit the slightest of error. Now, this language, coupled with ongoing alerts across the region, underlines how fragile this de-escalation is. The war has been muted, not concluded. At the core of this arrangement lies the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which about 20% of the world's oil supply normally passes, making it one of the planet's most critical energy arteries. Trump made the complete, immediate and safe reopening of Hormuz a precondition for suspending US strikes, while Iran has agreed only with certain caveats, promising safe passage but insisting this must be coordinated with its armed forces and shaped by certain technical constraints. Remember, for many years and throughout this current war, Tehran has used Hormuz as strategic leverage, and the Strait now functions as both bargaining chip and a barometer. In fact, any fresh disruption will instantly signal that the ceasefire is fraying. Iran's public messaging makes clear it has not ordered an unconditional halt to operations. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has stated bluntly, if attacks against Iran are halted, our most powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operation. The key word here is defensive, a deliberate elastic term that leaves Tehran with ample room to justify missile launches, drone activities, and even proxy actions as response rather than aggression. In such an environment of deep mistrust, this ambiguity is perilous because each side will reach intent differently, and a single contested incident could break this fragile arrangement. Now, Iran has also tabled a sweeping 10-point peace proposal that goes well beyond a simple ceasefire and aspires to be a comprehensive settlement statement. Some of the important points include a permanent end to hostilities across multiple theaters, including Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen, lifting of US sanctions, release of frozen Iranian assets, and most importantly, financial compensation for reconstruction. For Tehran, this is framed as a grand bargain. Security guarantees and economic relief in exchange for regional de-escalation, though Washington has not publicly embraced all of these terms. But US President says it's workable. Now, a key complication has already surfaced inside Iran's own proposal. News agency AP has reported that Iran, in the Farsi language version of its 10-point ceasefire plan, including the phrase acceptance of enrichment for its nuclear program, something that was missing in English version shared by Iranian diplomats to certain journalists. It wasn't immediately clear why that term was missing. However, Trump has said many times ending Iran's nuclear program entirely was a key point of the war. AP also reports that Iran's mission to the United States declined to comment till late Tuesday on these discrepancies between English and Farsi versions of the ceasefire deal Tehran put out. Well, the omission has led to uncertainty regarding Iran's intention, particularly, like I mentioned, after US President Donald Trump, who has advocated for the complete dismantling of Iran's nuclear program. Now, the ceasefire reach is also being tested on the Lebanon front. Hours after US President Donald Trump's announcement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office issued a statement welcoming the ceasefire between the US and Iran, while stressing that it does not cover Lebanon despite Pakistani mediators' claims to the contrary. Now, this divergence, Israel defending continued military pressure in Lebanon and Pakistan urging restraint and inclusive diplomacy, highlights how contested and fragmented the emerging peace map of the region remains. Well, at the end, Trump has claimed that almost all of the various points of past contentions have been agreed to, describing Iran's proposal as a workable basis for a final deal. Yet the most fundamental dispute over Iran's nuclear stockpile, sanctions, regional influence and broader balance of power in the Middle East are still open. For now, peace appears to be prevailing, held together by a 2-week ceasefire, a choke point reopening in progress, and a 10-point framework full of both promises and some contradictions. Well, the real test will begin now, and we will get to know if this pause turns into a pathway to settlement or merely mark a brief, fragile lull before the war resumes in an even more dangerous form.